Coming up, 3 key takeaways from the Hard Knocks final trailer that could be a big concern for Big Blue. Saquon Barkley, Brian Daboll, Daniel Jones, all coming up next. Yes, my friend, it's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Marmrecht, over there, Andrew Makowitz. We're healthy, we're wealthy, we're wise. We're gearing up towards what is, yes, the next most exciting thing for the New York Football Giants this offseason. It's Hard Knocks premiering, the first coming up here in July, going to be pretty revealing, it seems like. And while it was just a final trailer, and we're not going to sit here and try to dissect into the nth degree 80 seconds, there are going to seemingly, Andy, be some answers to key questions about how this past off season unfolded for Big Blue.
Yeah, what I also took away really quick before we even talk about Saquon Barkley is how excited I am to see all the off-season things. Like, I thought, you see training camp, you see guys trying to make the roster, you're super excited about like learning these people and the personalities. I didn't realize how invested I'm going to be in this offseason because there's so many storylines. We talked about Saquon Barkley, what was obviously a key piece of it. They featured Daniel Jones in his rehabilitation. You obviously have Brian Daboll talking about making it in New York. I am riveted by this. And the whole entire situation made me so excited for July 2nd to get this thing going. It feels like, the Giants agreed to do this for not just like, hey, we're going to just do it because out of the goodness of our heart. It feels like there's a little bit of rehabilitation in terms of images and people and things going on that maybe the Giants want to change the narrative of.
Yeah, this potential reversal of perception for the New York Football Giants organization. And this episode of OGP is brought to you by Personam. It's an AI-driven cyber threat detection engine. Personam improves your vision into your network security environment and allows you to see cyber threats that other tools and platforms simply cannot do. Personam is always vigilant and always learning. And I agree with you, Andy. Like, I said this going back several weeks, if not last month, about how the New York Football Giants, while we look at it as, okay, one more step into the Joe Schoen rebuild, don't get overly caught up in what was a flash, making the playoffs and beating the Vikings. That's okay. You can think about youth. You can think about turning over the roster. We discussed what he came into and the 11-player draft that needs to be successful for him in critical year threes. But also, you have concerns around the coaching staff. You have concerns around key star players. You have concerns just about whether or not this GM is capable of executing this rebuild, including paying Daniel Jones from the previous regime and carrying over that QB contract, who already came in with injury concerns and then compounded that a year ago as well. So 100%, like, make no mistake about it, there is a correlation between the New York Football Giants deciding to allow unprecedented, by their standards, access inside of their organization and the fact that they've been kind of looked at as a bit of a dumpster fire over the last few years. So with that being the case, the first thing here coming out of this, which I think is fascinating, not because of Saquon Barkley himself, but just the fact that one of the snippets in the trailer is Joe Schoen saying, hey, can you guarantee that I will have the opportunity to match the offer as you go to the market and you seek that big payday? Okay, great. And the quote exactly here, Saquon, can you give me your word that you are not going to give us a chance, right? That's the answer I want. That's the question I want the answer to, because the ripple effect of that is pretty dramatic around the Giants offseason, what they wanted to do, then what they tried to do, what they maybe failed to do, and what we talked about in the draft as well, maybe what they missed out on in terms of how they want to structure their team.
So just to be clear,
I butchered that quote, but it's okay.
Yeah, no, but it's important because the words matter in terms of like who's going to be telling the truth and who's not telling the truth when this all unfolds. The exact quote from Joe Schoen was, Saquon, can you give me your word on that? Or are you not going to give us a chance?
Yeah.
And so when you hear that, that is the only snippet they give. They don't give Saquon's response before that or after that. So you don't know exactly what it is. I think you and I are both inferring that basically they couldn't come to terms. Saquon Barkley's set to be a free agent.
Yeah.
Joe Schoen's like, we'd love to have you back. And Saquon's like, I would love to be back if it's going to be at the right price that I can get on the market. And I'm guessing that Joe Schoen said, Saquon, can you give me your word on that? Or are you not going to give us a chance? And it'll be very telling Because if Saquon Barkley says, yes, I will give you every opportunity to re-sign me, then it's interesting because then it means Saquon Barkley called Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll and said, here's the offer I'm getting from another team. Do you want to match it? And they said, no, best of luck to you. Or Saquon got the best offer that he got, being from Pennsylvania, looked at it and said, I'm just going to sign with the Eagles and I'll see you later to the Giants.
Yeah.
And that would create a little bit more controversy because that would contradict a little bit of what Saquon has said, especially on social media platforms and everywhere else, about how like the Giants didn't want me, they didn't give me the offer, whatever it's going to be. That part of it is the interesting piece to me.
Social Andy, social platform Andy. I really don't care about that. I don't care about whether or not someone was truthful or not truthful. I just care about what the Giants' intentions were. I care about what they wanted to accomplish versus what they were able to accomplish. Now, to your point, if it ends up being that they were unable to have the chance to match, right? That's fine. That tells you something. I think we all know price point matters here. It was a lot of money that Philadelphia gave to Saquon, so that's fine too. But if the idea was that the New York Football Giants just on paper said, hey, what we want to do is keep Saquon Barkley here, finish building out our roster a little bit, make sure we have that featured player, the face of the franchise going forward, and then we'll make decisions about Daniel Jones after the season's over and his contract has the out in it and everything else that we may want to do. Just the idea that if that was the plan, and you got diverted from that. That's interesting. And then I mentioned before about then you go to the draft and we think about the Carolina Panthers and getting up ahead of you for the number 1 ranked running back in the draft. Then that would be another one where you would say, if we're examining Joe Schoen and his tenure as GM, just from hey, what's the plan, Joe? He goes, we're going to re-sign Saquon Barkley, and then we're going to take a look at Daniel Jones after the year. Okay, Saquon's not coming back. Okay, we're going to focus on the draft. We're going to get ourselves a different running back, and we're going to go ahead and move forward. Okay, you messed up that. All right, we're going to sign a guy new from Buffalo once upon a time, and we're going to, you know what I mean? Like just the pivot process, something that every organization has to do. That's the part that I'm interested in, less about did Saquon spin a narrative or did the Giants try to spin a narrative? Because that's always a part of it. That's always a part of what either side's going to do. I just want to know, what did you want to accomplish and what did you end up having to choose to do? And by the way, the truth can end up being in the middle. We'd like to bring you back, but the price point, et cetera, et cetera. I won't be shocked if that's what the presented result is from a Giants perspective. We were willing to talk about it, but we were never fully committed to spending big dollars. They're going to come out of this thing from a Hard Knocks perspective, making it feel like this was a natural decision for us.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I love narratives more than you do. I love the off-field stuff more than you do. And maybe that's why I'm so interested in this Hard Knocks, because it's all of that behind the scenes. Who said what? Who's moving the chess pieces on the chessboard? Adam, I think you and I are both in agreement. What I think we're going to see, and I'm curious what episode it ends up coming out at. I think the Giants made a competitive $10 million-ish offer to Saquon Barkley before free agency.
Yes.
Saquon's like, I know my worth. I'm going to go hit the free agent market. And Joe Schoen said, hey, if you want to be here, just give us an opportunity to match. Saquon probably says yes. And I think Saquon called and said, I'm already getting offers in the $13 million range. And Joe Schoen said, that is way too much. We're not going to go there. So we wish you the best of luck if you want to take one of those offers. That is what I think both you and I think, right?
Yes, that's my assumption, that everybody was ready to part ways, and anything other than that would be very surprising to me. But again, process matters to me, and what the Giants intended to do matters to me. Coming up here in a second, there's also going to be some stuff, as we saw from the trailer, Daniel Jones recovering from his injury and trying to get himself back on the field. He's been doing his offseason program, as he has done every year since becoming a pro, working out with several key players and giving perspective on what he knows he needs to do. Do we buy into Daniel Jones' ability to accomplish that? We'll get into it here in just one moment. All right, as we continue, OGP, remind you, today's episode is also brought to you by Pietential, Pietential. That spells Pietential. It is a free online assessment tool for individual users that sets a baseline for your well-being, gives you tools to improve over time, and tracks your progress as well. This might be a great tool for one Daniel Jones, who comes into a critical year for him individually, if not also for the New York Football Giants. Andy, when we talk about Daniel Jones, there's obviously a lot to dissect about him, but when interviewing with G-Men HQ, who covered this quote coming off of it, making sure that we're better on third down was a big thing. Watching and talking about it this offseason, Daniel Jones said, making sure we're staying on the field and putting together long drives. I think we're still trying to improve and create more explosive plays and getting the ball downfield, hitting the chances we get. That's throwing and ball accuracy, letting guys run and taking advantage of the shots we have. Those are things we're always working on, but we have a lot of guys that can make big plays. Listen, that's not groundbreaking. You want to make big plays. But how do you feel like Daniel Jones is at least coming into this with the understanding, if I'm going to be successful, let's just assume healthy, I need to remove the stink of last season in the limited sample where I seemed shy to throw, hesitant, bad working through my progressions, and unwilling to take some of the risks, which when you're a bad team, you have to be willing to let it rip. And that could be a version of this season.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's talking. I don't really put too much into what Daniel Jones said because he basically checked all the boxes of like the Mad
Gotta
Libs of
work
what
hard,
we
want
want
to
to
try
do.
hard.
He's like, we want to stay on the field and put together long drives. And then he also, the next sentence says, we need more explosive plays. It's like,
Yeah.
well, explosive plays lead to touchdowns, so you're not on the field for very long. So like those kind of go back. And he's like, I need to be more accurate. Is there any quarterback in the league that's like, I'm as accurate as I possibly can be? It's like,
Or I need to be less accurate, honestly.
yeah,
If
you know
I'm
what?
doing
I'm too
self-evaluation.
accurate. Sometimes I hit too close to the helmet when people are catching the ball. Like I really need to, make it a little bit tougher for my wide receivers. But no,
I'm gonna throw less balls at the numbers and more balls at the ankles. That's my plan for this season.
well, but what is noteworthy is at least he's acknowledging that they do need to make more explosive plays. If he's like, no, we just need to be healthy and we'll be okay on offense, you're like, well, that's not what we saw when people were healthy last season. And so
Sure.
the acknowledgement from him that we do need more explosive plays. The Giants acknowledged it by going out and getting an explosive playmaker in Malik Neighbors.
Yep.
Like, I think Daniel Jones is also realizing there are no more excuses. Like it feels like the organization has not only paid him handsomely, but also protected him from a lot of the scrutiny and criticism that outside the building is getting. And they're saying, Daniel Jones is our guy. We believe in him. We're going to get him more playmakers. If we get him a better offensive line and we get him playmakers, you're going to see the results on the field. It feels like to me, that's Daniel Jones looking and saying, they've had my back, and this year is my time to pay them off for all of the trust that they've had in me through all of the harsh criticism that we've received.
Yeah, I mostly think that the Giants may already be like done with Daniel Jones. In a lot of ways, it's why the out's in the contract, but maybe it's not. And John Mara came out and said this. We did everything we could to screw this kid up, and that's great. And it may be a little bit of fluff. Again, when it comes to Daniel Jones and it comes to the offense, I kind of don't care that it's Daniel Jones saying it. I only care about this offense throwing the ball down the field more often. If Daniel Jones is going to be the starter for this team, I need to know that you are willing to launch 5 to 7 deep balls down the field to connect with your new number one Malik Neighbors, to let Jalen Hyatt burn, to get Wan'Dale Robinson on a little slant route over the middle and have him cook and, shift and shimmy and break off big plays. Like, I don't care how it gets done, because all I care about is the development of the young players. That receiving core is now filled with young talent that we believe can be a really explosive group going forward. So you can be terrible, Daniel Jones, overall. As long as you give me X number of plays every game that allows these guys to develop and become better versions of themselves, that's fine. You can take 13 sacks, and then you can also put out 8 really good plays that help these wide receivers make passes, make moves after the catch. And by the way, that does not put these receivers in really dangerous positions. You go back to a year ago when Daniel Jones was the quarterback and he was having some success with now retired Darren Waller. There were times when those passes weren't in places that it was going to be, hey, hope you can absorb the big hit, an injury-prone tight end in his 30s. Guess what? You can't. So I'm looking at it from that standpoint. I just need you to be the guy that can get the ball in the place that it needs to be often enough to see growth from this team. It really won't be about wins and losses to a certain extent for me.
So we know if and when Daniel Jones is healthy, they've already said countless times he is the starter going into week 1, presumably, if he can get on the field. I have a question for you, because it feels like everyone has the opinion that this is Daniel Jones's last season, because that's what the money says. The contract was structured to be able to get out of it.
That's right.
What does Daniel Jones have to do in order to get another year past this year? Is it win a lot of football games and be a game manager and just be there? Is it make explosive plays? Is it throw for 30 touchdowns to show that he can actually command an offense? Like, What do you think it is that would allow Daniel Jones to move past just being the bridge quarterback this season for the next quarterback that's coming up?
Yeah, I mean, you can go back and look at like the average yards per pass, right? And only 5.7 this past season, only 6.6 coming as a rookie, 6.8 the career high. So it's like, yeah, have your average yards per pass play be strong, keep the completion while keeping the completion percentage high, up over 67, 68%, which is what he's had the last couple of seasons, obviously with a lot of injuries a year ago. There's probably things like that that matter, not turning the ball over, right? Interception. So there's some version of it where if you're grip it and ripping it, I'll live with some of those mistakes for the growth. It's weird, man. I actually think it might be about how does Drew Lock look over the course of training camp, not about whether or not he's going to unseed Daniel Jones from the starting role. But a year from now, when you want to move off of Daniel Jones and draft your future quarterback, you want to know you have the veteran there that can bridge that gap. You can always go sign another guy. It's not a big deal. A version where the Giants are going to want to improve this roster and use all that money, I think you'd have to look at Daniel Jones at the end of the year and at a minimum say, oh, he is an overpriced bridge quarterback, but that's okay for us right now based on what our intentions are, bringing in a rookie quarterback, letting him learn for a year, and then going down the road, right? Like there's probably some version of that. How likely do I think it is? I don't know, but that I'm sure the Giants are willing to have that discussion because of where their cap space is going to be going forward.
Yeah, it is interesting. I just think of it like from a pure stats perspective too, Adam. Like when you look at last season, if you had 25 touchdown passes last season, you were in the top 10 in the NFL in touchdown passes, right? So if
Sure.
Daniel Jones gets 26, 27 touchdowns, which he's never had in his career, obviously his highest was his rookie year with 24. But I'm just saying, like, it would be fascinating because the numbers don't always tell the full story. Russell Wilson got benched at the end of the year. He finished 9th in touchdown passes. So I'm just thinking to myself, like, we want Daniel Jones to get more explosive plays equal more touchdown passes. I'm just curious, like, we've all written him already off being like, this is his swan song. It doesn't matter what he does. We're talking about Drew Lock. We're talking about his injury, but like, what is the path for Daniel Jones to be the starter beyond this season?
You know what? There's a deeper conversation for this for sure. And we want to get into Brian Daboll. But I will say, even what I'm laying out there, having it be less about the production and more about situational, just, you know what I mean? Letting the growth and all that stuff around him. As of right now, the Giants go into next offseason with $22 million in cap space. There's a lot of stuff that's happening there. You do have the Brian Burns contract on the books, right? So there's a lot of decisions to make there. $22 million is not an enormous amount. Now, if you don't have Daniel Jones on the roster, suddenly it is an enormous amount. So I walk that back a little bit in terms of, oh, could you just, live with him as being a very overpriced bridge quarterback for your rookie? Probably not, because you probably can improve this team way too much in key areas with all of that relief that he does need to be this absolute better than he was in the playoff season against the Vikings type of quarterback to even have the Giants go that distance. And everyone knows this here. We are of the camp that this is the end of the line for Daniel Jones for a multitude of reasons, including just being kind of injured, not that productive, not worth the money, older now, right? Like it's all just gone the wrong direction. That's fine. So I didn't want to get too in the weeds on this. There's a deeper examination and maybe some optimism from Andy. He's always that guy. Find that silver lining, especially when it comes to one Daniel Jones. But in a second here, the other thing we're going to watch for coming out of this is one Brian Daboll and the concerns here that maybe, just maybe, it was more than one bad apple in Wink Martindale that was upsetting the cart a year ago. We talk about that in the Hard Knocks preview coming up next. All right, Andy, OGP, closing it out. Hard Knocks starting on the 2nd. A lot of things to watch for. Daniel Jones' recovery from his injury. Did the Giants try to and fail to retain Saquon Barkley? And also, the rebuild narrative is very much about Brian Daboll, a guy who, at the Legends Night, by the way, has slimmed down. His family seems to have gotten a lot healthier over their tenure with the New York Football Giants, which is always just great from an individual level. I wonder if he's also gotten healthier from the way that he carries himself and communicates with the team, because there are growing reports that more than just Wink Martindale on the staff, more than just his two henchmen on the staff, looked at that situation and said, boy, Brian Daboll is a guy that sometimes fails to keep composure. And that's a problem when you are the head coach for an NFL team.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And you see all the different reports. I think Giants Wire put out a good detailed description of kind of like what has happened and what went down. So this is why the Hard Knocks episode is going to be a little bit of rehabilitation of Brian Daboll's image. He was known as the QB whisperer and got Daniel Jones to playoffs coach of the year, to all of a sudden a bunch of ex-coaches and everyone else coming out and saying, like, we're all just trying to get out of here. And I thought that was a huge, a non-defensive coach that said that. Obviously,
yes, both sides of the ball.
Yeah, well, and special teams as well.
And coming from Jordan Renan, by the way, who does a good job covering the team, seems to report it even-tempered. You know what I mean? You're not going to get a slant one side or the other. The very fact that he's saying this came from other coaches on both sides of the ball, that tells you that there's some validity to it, because there'd be no reason to go this route, at least from the way I perceive Jordan Renan to be when he covers this team.
Yeah, Jordan Renan came out and said that it was heard that Daboll yelled, "So you think I'm a clown?"
Yes.
In the direction of Wink Martindale during one of the practices, after all the media reports came out saying that Wink Martindale and the defense can't stand him. And so we all chalk that up to Wink Martindale, Drew and Kevin Wilkins, who are Wink Martindale's trusted right-hand men. But really, everyone was like, are we on the same team? He's yelling and screaming. Brian Daboll is, the pressure is getting to him when things are going good. He's the coach of the year. When things are going bad, he can't hold the locker room together, to the point where this is the reason why it sounds like Joe Schoen ended up hopping on the headset to be able to listen to who's calling plays, what's the communication going on between him and Kafka and other members of the coaching staff. And the coaches came back and said Daboll changed his tone and his tune when Joe Schoen was listening in, which is hilarious to me. Like, it feels like a kid in class that's doing something wrong, and then the teacher shows up and he's like, I was totally just doing my homework the whole time. Adam, if all of this is true, how it went down, this is really bad for Brian Daboll, and just in terms of optics. And you think about all the coaches that left: special teams coach gone, offensive line coach gone, the entire defensive coaching staff for the most part gone. Like, there's only one more opportunity for Brian Daboll to rehab his image and have coaches out there saying, no, we love working with Brian Daboll.
So, and you mentioned special teams coordinator Thomas McGahee, who, by the way, had his struggles and feels like that departure was necessary, maybe unrelated to Brian Daboll. Offensive line coach Bobby Johnson, again, was not doing the job, or at least did not seem to be a part of the solution. So his departure was understandable, both on Black Monday. But running backs coach Jeff Nixon, tight ends coach Andy Bishop, assistant offensive line coach Chris Smith, and director of strength and performance Craig Fitzgerald. Now, again, that's beyond the field and coaching, but it's another department change that happens here to go along with this symbolic gesture when we talk about Mike Kafka. Well, you're being promoted, but we're also stripping away responsibilities. There's just a lot of things going on here for the New York Football Giants. And I'll put my most comical note coming out of this coverage. Thus far, Daboll has done exactly that in terms of the explosiveness that John Mara wanted him to be addressed, where he said he'd like him to tone it down a bit. Players have noted that he was much calmer this spring, and his eruptions have come fewer and further between. Now, here's the thing.
I mean,
why would he? What is he erupting about? These are walkthroughs in OTA.
It's May.
Yeah. So my biggest concern here, coming out at the end of this, was like, well, let's not go too positive here, guys. There hasn't actually been any coaching or football being played here. Now, do I think that, again, truth lies somewhere in the middle, that Brian Daboll is a guy who looks open and willing to learn and change the way he goes about it? Of course. But the idea that, hey, man, it really looks like it's turned over the new leaf. You got to give me any situation where anything would warrant exploding or having an outburst about something to say, well, he didn't blow his top when the rookies were doing shorts and T-shirt walkthroughs. Like, that was the weirdest part of it to cap things off.
Well, picture this. The Giants are 0-2. It's the third game of the season. A player misses an assignment on defense and gives up a touchdown. The Giants go down 7-0. Are we going to see the Zen Brian Daboll at that moment? That's what I care about. When they're in shorts and a T-shirt and they're tossing around playing tag in the backyard, like, yeah, of course, everyone's feeling happy and good. So I am totally with you on this. Like, that will stand the test of time. It's always like, oh, this player is zipping, this quarterback zipping balls to his wide receivers.
Of course,
like, well, show me in a game. Like, can we get to that point? The thing about Kafka, can I just make a side joke?
Sure.
Is the NFL the only place where you get a promotion and you have to do less work and it's considered a slight? Like, Adam, if you want to promote me on OGP, give me a promotion and then tell me I only have to do half the episodes. Like, that sounds like a pretty good deal to me, to like have to do less work but get more notoriety and recognition. I don't know. Is the NFL the only place that happens?
Do less, get paid more. But now, to be fair, tongue in cheek as you may be, Mike Kafka is also looked at basically a marionette that is just being the strings pulled from above by Brian Daboll. So if you want me, listen, Andy, you are now the head of the OGP podcast, but I will be telling everyone that you don't make any content decisions. You don't handle any of the PR, social media. And honestly, I don't think you're going to have a real bright future in the industry. Like that's sort of the equivalent of what's happening.
By week 17, Andy, we both agree you won't be here anymore. So like,
yeah.
But at the end of the season, at the end of the day, Adam, you will be taking this and running with it. Yes, tongue in cheek wise, we all know what's going on with Mike Kafka. But to that point, we always thought it was on the defensive side of the ball where the real problems lie. But obviously, Mike Kafka was thinking about taking a lateral move to be an offensive coordinator for another team. Right. So like, whether it's the play calling responsibilities or not, whether it's what was going on with Brian Daboll or not, Brian Daboll has to change the narrative. And I think this Hard Knocks episode is going to allow him to do that. You have to think that the Giants PR team sat down with Joe Schoen, sat down with Brian Daboll and was like, here are the buzzwords you can say. Here are the buzzwords you can't say. And like, you have to follow this because we need to rehab all of our images for us to look good in this upcoming season.
By the way, man, you said at the end of the day, week 3, 0-2, player makes a mistake. Week 1, red zone. Daniel Jones, interception on a touchdown pass, reminiscent of years prior. That's the test. Like, and I'm not even judging Brian Daboll for that. He's coming into a year where, hey, my job, in theory, could very much be on the line this season. I cannot afford to walk out here after everything we do and we show the Hard Knocks and we all know it's going to be a big, bright, beautiful, you son of a B. You cannot throw that late route to the post when you know for a fact they have safety help over the top. Like, that's reactionary in the moment response. And that usually is when you see the true nature of somebody, whether or not Brian Daboll may be very good during the week. I think the biggest question I have is about on Sundays, staying even tempered and making sure that you execute and also react to what other teams are trying to do. How does this team develop? This is all about. How does this team develop organizationally as they are a young, turning over the roster team right now with a lot of opportunity ahead of them? So, because it is at the end of the day, Andy, you know that this is going to kick off on the 2nd. We're going to break it down every single time. We're going to have fun with it too, by the way. We're not coming in here telling you that these are hard-hitting facts and you can take everything as gospel that comes out. But I do think we will get some insights. I do think that we will see stuff around the injury and the rehab for Daniel Jones and just getting a sense of where these players are. Maybe Malik Neighbors and some interactions. That kind of stuff is going to be a lot of fun to take a look at, especially when we think about the draft and key rookies like Tyler Nubin and Drew Phillips. There's a lot of fun things here that could come out of Hard Knocks. So we'll break that all down as it unfolds. And if you want to be a part of it, you get over to YouTube at One Giant Podcast. You get us on your podcast feed at One Giant Podcast. Please, please, please go subscribe on your podcast feeds. It means a lot to us as we continue to grow it, pushing towards 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. Help us with that as well. But until the next time, until the best times, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and demand that people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.